Hi everyone, this is Religiolog, and today I'd like to discuss Sigmund Freud and his views on religion. While relying on academic critical reviews, I'll try to explain it in a simple and accessible language, so I hope that by the end of this video you'll be able to identify what was Freudian approach to religion and what modern scholars of religion think about such approach. So please watch until the end. Just a reminder, this is another video from the series on classical theories of religion, so please subscribe and press the bell button to be notified of new videos. As you may know, Freud was a doctor and the founder of psychoanalysis from Austria. Obviously, religion wasn't his field of expertise, yet he wrote few works related to religion. Out of many, I'll mention at least 4. All of them ended up to be quite controversial. And in this video review, despite your own attitude towards Freudian theory of religion, I'd like to invite you all to think carefully about his claims and even challenge them. I want us all to think whether it is applicable to our contemporary reality, especially his thoughts about the future of religion. Freud raised very fundamental and provocative questions. For example, he wanted to see our world free of religion and believed that it was possible. But is it? I'm not saying yes or no, but let's see why Freud thought that it was possible. After explaining general idea of Freudian approach to religion, we'll talk about critique, because believe me, today there is a huge pushback and rejection of Freudian ideas from scholars of religion. Freud didn't claim that religion is evil or useless, and that we need to get rid of it by any means. No, he recognized that in the earlier history of humanity, as he put it, the times of its ignorance and intellectual weakness, religion served us and was inevitable. It played a very important and even a positive role in the development of our species, but civilization is now mature and established. Freud recognized that he personally had no need in religion. He never been religious and didn't see value in it. Therefore, he approached religion as something that our human civilization used as a crutch. But we as humanity have outgrown this step in our cognitive evolution, and now we can move further without a reliance on religion. In the article Obsessive Actions and Religious Practices, Freud noticed a close resemblance between the activities of religious people and the behavior of his neurotic patients. Both, for example, place great emphasis on doing things in a patterned ceremonial fashion. Both also feel guilty unless they follow the rules of their rituals to perfection. In both cases, too, the ceremonies are associated with the repression of basic instincts, sexual desires, control of ego, or repression of selfishness. This way, Freud approaches religion as a disease or pathology that must be cured. It is a universal obsessional neurosis of humanity, and just like children expected to overgrow their disorder, similarly a turning away from religion is inevitable. It is a natural process of growth. Moreover, according to Freud, we find ourselves at this very historical juncture in the middle of that phase of development. This way, Freud could easily envision the future world without any religion. For him, a society free of religion is a healthy society. He states, to view religious teachings as neurotic relics, and we may now argue that the time has probably come, as it does in an analytic treatment, for replacing the effects of oppression by the results of the rational operation of the intellect. At the same time, he recognized that there is a reason why people keep being religious, even when their religion has been discredited by science or better philosophy. He agreed that the real and ultimate source of religious appeal is not the rational mind but the unconscious. Religion lies deep beneath the rational. Therefore, we should not expect that believers would give up their faith because it has been proven irrational. Just like a neurotic patient would not give up continuous hand washing because someone has pointed out that his hands are already quite clean. The normal causes we see on the surface of things are not the real causes of the behavior. So, if we want to understand religious behavior, we need to dig deeper. In his view, religion can be reduced to little more than a byproduct of psychological distress. It turns out to be illusionary wish fulfillment generated by our unconscious. But when it comes to the question of what to do with religion, Freud wasn't in support of harsh repressions against it. He states, it is certainly senseless to begin by trying to do away with religion by force and at a single blow. Above all, because it would be hopeless. The believer will not let his belief be turned from him, either by arguments or by prohibitions. And even if this did succeed with some, it would be cruelty. A man who has been taking sleeping draughts for tens of years is naturally unable to sleep if his sleeping draught is taken away from him. That the effect of religious consolation may be linked to that of narcotic is well illustrated by what is happening in America. There, they are now trying to deprive people of all stimulants, intoxicants, and other pleasure-producing substances, and instead, by way of compensation, are surfeiting them with piety. These words were written in the 1920s, so he points to the period of national prohibition in the United States. Remember, he lived in Austria. So we see that Freud compares religion to anesthesia or intoxicant. Religion is a painkiller that helps people to overcome their life challenges. In 1899, Freud published The Interpretation of Dreams. In a way, it started what some call the Freudian Revolution. This work outlined very important concept of the unconscious. For example, E.B. Tylor thought that it was the experience of dreams which led primeval people to believe in souls. Freud accepts this claim but goes a bit further. He focuses on the realm of unconscious, which is the source of our most basic physical needs, our desires for food and sexual activity. Freud understood us as evolving from animals and still carrying many animal instincts. There was a time when many things like incest, murder, cannibalism were considered a norm in our culture. We could easily kill another human being and then eat their liver or brain. Today it is illegal, but we still have instincts that come out of our animal nature. Therefore, sometimes we have some wild desires to have sex with everyone or desire for violence. Sometimes we see weird dreams where we express these wishes. So according to Freud, we needed a mechanism to help us suppress these immoral unconscious desires. And here religion comes to play. In this picture, dreams indicated that to a degree all people are neurotic, and Freud describes dreams as wish fulfillments. Therefore, please understand correctly, when Freud calls religious people neurotic, don't take it personally. In his mind, we are all neurotic. We struggle with our nature and try to overgrow that wild phase, just like kids are struggling with their childhood neurosis. So we find such approach to religion in that article from 1907 and then in these 3 books on religion, Totem and Taboo, The Future of an Illusion, and Moses and Monotheism. One of the key narratives here is that the institutions of our civilization must rely on coercion. As a result, we have created rules and dogmas for the society to provide security. Since our civilization is based on forced labor and the rejection of primary desires, it causes resentment among those who suffer from it. Therefore, in every culture, there must be means for protection, methods of coercion, and ways of reconciling a person with cultural restrictions. And here religion plays the role of psychotherapy. Religion serves as a painkiller to comfort us. When we are in trouble, we turn to religion. For more details, please read Freud's work Totem and Taboo, where he presents a psychological interpretation of the life of primeval people. It is based on the idea that our species are going not just through biological evolution, but also through intellectual and social evolution. When trying to understand how our ancestors came to such commandments as "thou shalt not kill" and other restrictions, Freud speculates on his controversial idea of the Oedipus complex. But basically going a bit deeper in history, Freud is also trying to show how our helplessness before the formidable forces of nature gave rise to religion. Though nature has produced our species, it also constantly threatens to destroy us, whether through predators, disasters, disease, or physical decline. First, we have anthropomorphized the forces of nature in order to better communicate with them. But later we turn these forces into gods or often fathers. Why fathers? Because Freud compared it to how children fear their father, but at the same time hope for his protection. According to Freud, the gods retain the threefold task. They must exorcise the terrors of nature, they must reconcile man to the cruelty of fate, particularly as it is shown in death, and they must compensate them for the sufferings and privations which a civilized life in common has imposed on them. To be protected, we have joined into clans and communities and eventually created nations or civilization. On one hand, we gained security, but at what price? We had to bend our personal desires to the rules and restraints of society. We cannot just kill somebody when we are angry, or take something that doesn't belong to us, or satisfy sexual desires as we want. We must restrain our instincts. But even with these sacrifices and comforts, civilization cannot fully protect us. In the face of disease and death, we are all ultimately helpless. We are all going to die anyway, so we need religion, we need some higher power to comfort us, to reassure us against the dangers of the storm and the darkness of the night. We need a voice of strength to say that all will be well in the end. Over time, the gods are finally separated from nature and morality becomes their main function. In one of the next videos, I'll discuss how a psychologist from University of British Columbia, Aaron Aranzayan, in his book Big Gods, discusses some similar ideas. For example, Naranzayan is trying to argue what helped our ancestors to move from hunter-gatherers to agricultural lifestyle. Because for hundreds of thousands of years, we lived in small groups, where we knew everyone, but eventually we began to create large settlements. And here our brains were forced to deal with outsiders. And in order to reduce the level of anxiety and violence, it is likely that we were forced to rely on religion. To provide safety for large-scale cooperation, we needed the idea of gods or supernatural forces that are constantly watching over us and punishing us for bad behavior. That is, the question of mutual trust between us and strangers is fundamental here. Therefore, in their work, Naranzayan and his colleagues try to understand what exact role our gods must play to address the needs of large communities. They claim that belief in hell is stronger than belief in heaven. For the purposes of social evolution, it was necessary for us to believe not in forgiving gods, but in punishing gods. And if we study religions and supernatural powers among our ancestors tens of thousands of years ago, then their gods and spirits were very local, they were not omnipotent, and they were not particularly concerned with moral issues. But as soon as we began to unite in large communities and began to deal with strangers, we had to reconstruct our gods and endow them with omnipotence and omniscience. Such heavenly police have allowed society to grow while maintaining safety and order. Authors claim that such societies with punishing deities succeeded in competition with other more divided groups of people. In other words, there probably was a strong evolutionary social need and functionality in such adaptation. After all, before that, we mostly rely on the concept of gods to explain natural phenomena like why it rains or why tsunamis, earthquake, etc. In the beginning, our gods were not concerned with moral issues, but with natural phenomena. I mention this because I see some parallels with Freud. Again, I remind you to subscribe and press the bell button so that you won't miss this review on the book by Aaron Aranzayan and many other reviews on my channel. And of course, I would be deeply grateful for your likes under this video. It shows me your support for the work I do. Now let's get back to Freud. According to him, religion is a defense mechanism to create a sense of security. I already told you a few reasons, but one of the main reasons is because we are animals who understand that one day we all will die. And for Freud, the best word we can use to describe such defense mechanism is illusion. As long as religion fulfills those functions, it is not as important whether it is true or not from the intellectual point of view. Here the logic is simple. Since we need religion to fulfill these particular functions, if we can find a way to solve our anxieties by substituting our needs with something else, then we can create a culture free of religion. We no longer need a crutch. And here I want to make a transition from Totem and Taboo to the future of illusion. Because while Totem and Taboo looks backward into the prehistoric past, the future of illusion considers religion in the present and looks ahead. Freud is provoking us to think whether it is possible to create a world free of religion, an atheistic utopia. Also in this book, he puts a focus less on rituals or practices than on ideas and beliefs, particularly belief in God. And this is what is interesting about Freud. Yes, just like Fraser and Tyler, he agrees that religious beliefs are erroneous, they are superstitions. In his case, he grew up in a family of cultural Jews that was largely non-religious, so from beginning to end he was a natural atheist. He found no reason to believe in God and therefore saw no value or purpose in the rituals of religious life. But he was curious of human nature, and unlike Tyler and Fraser, who were not much interested in such questions, Freud asked himself, why, if these religious superstitions are so obviously false, do so many people persist in holding these beliefs, and with such deep conviction? For example, Egyptians believed in their gods for thousands of years. But if religion is not rational, how do people acquire it, and why do they keep it? Later, of course, he became convinced that he had found the answers in psychoanalysis. He also thought that different people are on different levels of cognitive development, therefore not everyone is ready to walk without crutches. In one of his works, he even poses a question. By kind of looking down at these still religious people, he concludes, civilization has little to fear from educated people and brain workers. In them, the replacement of religious motives for civilized behavior by other, secular motives would proceed unobtrusively. Moreover, such people are to a large extent themselves vehicles of civilization. But it is another matter with a great mass of uneducated and oppressed who have every reason for being enemies of civilization. As you may see, he even calls such people who aren't educated enough, according to him, the enemies of civilization. So while he is dreaming of a moral and secular world where people act rationally, he recognizes that it is not an easy task and it may take a long time. He states, for masses are lazy and unintelligent. They have no love for instinctual renunciation, and they are not to be convinced by argument of its inevitability. Such people, according to Freud, may commit murder if not told that God forbids it. He is afraid that if humanity will discover that there is no God, then chaos, which we have banished through many thousands of years of the work of civilization, will come again. In other words, if you remember the experiment with invisible Princess Alice, he is afraid that if we take the princess off the chair, children will keep cheating. At the same time, he writes, thus, I must contradict you when you go on to argue that men are completely unable to do without the consolation of the religious illusion, that without it they cannot bear the troubles of life and the cruelties of reality. That is true, certainly, of the man into whom you have installed the sweet or bittersweet poison from childhood onwards. But what of the other men who have been sensibly brought up? Perhaps those who do not suffer from the neurosis will need no intoxicant to deaden it. Here he probably talks about his own experience, don't you think so? And just take a look what he says next. They will find themselves in a difficult situation. They will have to admit to themselves that the full extent of their helplessness and their insignificance in the machinery of the universe. They will be in the same position as a child who has left the parental house where he was so warm and comfortable. But surely infantilism is destined to be surmounted. Men cannot remain children forever. We may call this education to reality. Need I confess to you that the sole purpose of my book is to point out the necessity of this forward step. As you may see, it is a straightforward call that, hey everyone, no matter how hard it may be for human beings, we must overgrow that infantilism and superstition and leave religion behind. So Freud is clearly dreaming of such world free of religion. He admits that some may object and say that for the sake of the supposedly greater good, even if we find out that religion is false, it is in our own interest to remain silent about it and live as it is all true, because religion provides more security. But Freud refuses to accept such approach. He states, what a lot of accusations all at once. Nevertheless, I am ready with rebuttals for them all, and I shall assert the view that civilization runs a greater risk if we maintain our present attitude to religion than if we give it up. And then in chapter 7 he begins to explain why it is more beneficial for us to abandon illusionary beliefs. Basically, he says that yes, religion has undoubtedly helped our civilization to advance, but not enough. We gave it a chance, but it failed. For many millennia, religion has guided human lives. It was very influential and had time to demonstrate what it was capable of. And if religion would really help solve our problems, then no one would dare to accuse it or go against it. But in reality, while being helpful to some degree, it also caused a lot of harm and created problems. For example, Freud says that in every age immorality has found no less support in religion than morality has. People have committed immoral actions, then they repented or made sacrifices and continued to sin again. Here he even accuses Dostoevsky, saying that Russian introspectiveness has reached the pitch of concluding that sin is indispensable for the enjoyment of all the blessings of divine grace, so that at bottom sin is pleasing to God. Therefore, Freud says that we can exclude religion from our lives, and we should not be afraid of this. There are many people who don't believe in the supernatural and feel great. The benefits outweigh the harm. But is religion harmful to society? Freud thinks not completely, so he's kind of ambiguous here. Religion is both harmful and helpful. Some people don't need it, some still need religion, but it will be better to get rid of it. In chapter 8, Freud talks about the need for transition from religious morality to secular morality based on reason. He thinks that through education we can build a more rational and less emotional society, and we should not be afraid of it. Why do we need society founded on such superstition and repression based on mythology? Science must replace religious thinking. Of course, he recognizes that science cannot help us with everything. But if we leave the idea of the afterlife and focus on this life, we can reduce the level of suffering and make this world less oppressive. After all, compared with religion, science has shown greater effectiveness in a shorter period of time. Freud kind of hints that to build a secular moral society, we need a good education, but since many poor people will not have access to education, they will have to work hard and fight for survival. Therefore, such people will need religion to better cope with their struggles. Please remember, all this was written before World War II and works of postmodernists. Now, my friends, let me finish here, and I invite you all to challenge Freud and try to think critically whether such world is possible in the future. Again, you may agree or disagree with Freud, but let us think. After a century, many people still ask this fundamental question, while some oppose it and claim it is no longer a legitimate question. The core problem here will be the definition of religion, which is basically a central problem in religious studies even today. Therefore, when you watch my videos on different theories of religion, please don't expect to find absolute answers. I rather try to point to various gaps or disagreements in the study of religion. To understand that problem in depth, please check this book. It was published by Oxford in 2021, and here scholars of religion argue about the best definition for religion. Is religion biologically hardwired? Or is religion a social construct? Is it just a cultural learning mechanism or byproduct of our brain development? And does it act on the level of our conscious behavior? Who is better equipped to explain religion, neurology or social sciences? Some scholars would say that religion is not a pathology, as Freud claimed. It is at least a byproduct of the cognitive models in the human brain, or it is a part of our normal healthy brain development. Moreover, religion is universal, and we as Homo sapiens are indeed homo-religious by default, or that we are hardwired for religion, while religious skepticism is a modern invention, a product of the European Enlightenment. Others would oppose it and claim that disbelief in the supernatural is as old as the hills. To them, atheism is not a modern invention, and is not necessarily a product of scientific revolution or progress. Such scholars would point to rationalists and skeptics in ancient China, India, the Greco-Roman world, or pre-Enlightenment Europe. Professor of Greek culture in Cambridge, Tim Whitmarsh, for example, would argue that questions that Freud asked 100 years ago were already asked at least 2,500 years ago. Back then, some Greek philosophers also dreamed that soon all religious superstitions will disappear and civilization would overgrow that illusionary phase. Of course, if they thought so back then, it makes us reflect about those who today, just like Freud, think that religion could disappear from our society. What if after 2,000 or 3,000 years from now, religion still be present in our world? It would simply take absolutely another shape. Many scholars would say that Freud understood religion very narrowly. He didn't recognize how problematic the very category of religion is. When we first started the academic study of religion back in the 19th century, scholars studied other religions through the lens of Western Protestant Christianity. As you may know, for many Protestants, faith is a key element. Therefore, scholars thought of religion as being about belief or coming primarily from a need to understand how the world works. For example, Tyler and Fraser thought that religion is something primarily intellectual, it is a system of ideas, and if these ideas come out to be absurd or mistaken, then there is no need to follow them anymore. E.B. Tyler defined religion as belief in supernatural beings. Such approach prioritizes individual thought over societal influence and neglects the important social aspect of practice and community. However, in the recent decades, with a better understanding of non-Abrahamic religion, such approach was widely rejected in the social sciences as being too Western or too Protestant. See these authors to understand more. In various disciplines, religion became viewed in a broader sense. There was a turn or a corrective response to Protestant bias in the field to study religion as a system of rituals, as a matter of lived practice rather than faith or belief, when the focus was on how religion has influenced human culture, art, music, architecture, and so on. Scholars like Robert Orsi discuss even the materiality of belief and the practice of religious life. Religion became viewed as more about what people do when they practice a religion, not what they believe in, or even as an effect, when the study of proto-religions in animals may help us to understand the development of religion in modern humans and their recent ancestors. For details, you may watch this video review on my channel. Here scholars discuss how religion could be viewed as an effect before it is a language or even a thought. But why do I mention all this? Because when Freud is rejecting religion, it is important to understand what exactly is Freud rejecting. Some scholars accuse him in functionalist reductionism. By seeing religion as a sign of disease, a symptom of psychic aberration, he is often aggressively reducing religion to nothing but a surface appearance, a set of neurotic symptoms produced by an underlying psychological trauma. Religion is never a reality on its own terms. It is always an appearance, an expression of something else. It is not a genuine agent in human behavior or thought, because its fundamental character is always passive. For Freud, religion arises from emotions and conflicts that originate early in childhood and lie deep beneath the rational or normal surface of the personality. Some believers could object to that by saying that at least certain religious projections might originate not from neurosis, but from a reasonable understanding of the real world as we perceive it. Also, Freud looks only at the psychological aspect of religion and misses many others. For example, he doesn't seem to know how beautiful and meaningful the communal aspect of religion can be, how much joy and support comes from belonging to a religious community. In addition, is it reasonable to compare the psychological growth of some individual and the historical development of a large social group, the entire civilization? As you may remember from this video, Durkheim also applied functionalist approach to religion, but Durkheim sees religion as social. He connects it more to society. Freud does something similar but approaches it from different angle. He focuses more on the processes inside the individual and their emotional subconscious needs. Freud sometimes seems to make universal claims as he has found an explanatory golden key, believing that psychoanalysis could provide us with all the answers. But can it? Is it justified to compare problems of individual person and extrapolate it to the entire culture? The one takes place over a period of few decades, the other takes place over the course of centuries in the history of the entire community or even civilization. What ground do we have logically to assume any real similarity or clear connection between these two very different things? Freud doesn't feel the need to look for data in the world. He feels he has found a fundamental mechanism in people that produces religion everywhere, regardless of the form it takes in any given culture. For Freud, there is no need to collect data from all over the world, when the source of all rituals and beliefs can be traced directly to the Oedipus complex and neurosis because everyone has it. And if we have in our hands the very principle that gives birth to all religions, then we don't need numerous works of anthropology, sociology, and comparative religion. But don't you think that such approach is very arrogant? Therefore, in recent decades, most social psychologists have moved away from the methods of psychoanalysis towards models of data collection, analysis, correlations, and so on. And for this kind of research, Freud's theory is considered unsuitable. He also failed to show how all religions arise from the wish fulfillment. For example, that Native American religions or Australian totemism is generated by the same psychological and social forces that gave rise to Judeo-Christian monotheism. In addition, Freud provides us not so much with a theory of religion in general, as with a theory of Judeo-Christian or monotheistic religion in particular. He's focusing way too much on the ideas of the Oedipus complex and the need for a father god. Yes, he tries to fit non-monotheistic religion in his paradigm, but it is not complete enough. But let's get back to the question of if Freud wants to see a world free of religion, what does he mean? As Phil Zuckerman noticed in his Society Without God, I have titled this book Society Without God as opposed to Society Without Religion. Zuckerman on one hand demonstrates that Denmark and Sweden probably the least religious countries in the world. At the same time, he states the majority of Danes and Swedes are still tax-paying members of their respective national churches. Most Danes and Swedes prefer to get married in church, and a large majority of Danes and Swedes still choose to baptize their children. Some people are third-generation atheists, but they still bring their kids to be baptized in a church. It tells us that atheists sometimes could behave religiously while abandoning superstitious beliefs. Zuckerman concludes, secularity comes in more than one form. There are various shades and degrees of secularity, just as there are various shades and degrees of religiosity. So what about Freud? Did he dream of the world without religion or without God? This is a very important question, don't you think so? We can only guess if Freud would be satisfied with such a situation as we witness in modern Denmark or the UK. See Abiday's work Believing in Belonging for more details. You know, something that Alain de Botton is describing, when we don't believe in all the superstitious baggage of religion, but when we appreciate the cultural heritage that comes from religion, community, beautiful music, art, architecture, and so on. Perhaps Freud would be okay with that. What do you think? Or let's take another dimension of religious behavior by openly non-religious people. Yes, to Freud, the awareness that we all will die plays one of the main reasons why religion is still pervasive. Professor John Messerly, in his article The End of Religion, Technology and the Future, states, if science defeats suffering and death, religion as we know it will die. Without suffering and death, religion will have lost its raison d'arte. For who will pray for heavenly cures when the cures already exist on earth? Who will die hoping for a reprieve from gods when science offers immortality? But just take a look at this example in the Church of Perpetual Life, so-called immortalists.
Let's go downstairs and meet some parishioners. So you believe you are not going to die?
I do.
You do?
I do, 100%.
100%? That's why you don't have a shadow of doubt in your mind?
No.
That must be a very liberating feeling.
It is.
I feel privileged to be around this environment that all the time reminds me that I'm physically immortal.
There's ways to enhance who we are and what we're going for. You don't have to be afraid of anything.
The paradox is that, as Gavin Fernanda puts it, perhaps the greatest irony of the Church is that it's almost aggressively atheist, fully based around science and rejecting of any notions of a spiritual afterlife. So is it possible that we can believe in the power of science or technology superstitiously, just like we believe in the power of God? For more examples on how secular people could behave religiously, please see, for example, these authors. Some also accuse Freud for not being a real scientist. He relied too much on non-verifiable speculations. His theories of personality and neurosis are constructed out of vague comparisons and misleading conclusions. Many of them cannot be even proved or disproved because, again, there is simply no scientific way to test them. Therefore, many do not consider psychoanalysis to be a valid science. As Daniel Pals summarizes, Freud was also a shrewd promoter of his own interests, as well as a man willing to bend evidence, ignore valid criticism, and even misuse people when such actions served the purpose of his program. Also, for some of his critiques, religion is not a pathology that psychoanalysis alone can cure, it is a therapy that psychoanalysis cannot provide. Today in gender studies, Freud is viewed as misogynist and someone who's seen women as inferior to men. For example, in her article, The Myth of the Vaginal Orgasm, Annie Coit reminds that Freud cemented the idea that vaginal orgasms are ideal and normal, but clitoral orgasms are immature. Women who didn't experience vaginal orgasm through intercourse were pathologized as frigid. She writes, Freud did not base his theory upon a study of women's anatomy, but rather upon his assumptions of women as inferior appendage to man. So, as you may see, there are many things in which we can easily accuse Sigmund Freud. Yes, in many ways Freud was unprofessional, arrogant, mean. Many of his theories and ideas are unscientifically bizarre. The mistake of many critics of Freud, however, is that they question first of all his contribution to science and focus on the unscientific nature of his works. But in fact, Freud's merit lies not so much in the discovery of some new laws of human psychology. Here indeed he was often mistaken. One of the major merits of Freud is in creating a fundamentally new approach in explaining all aspects of human life. He had the enormous influence on all spheres of thought in our time. As Daniel Pal states, the field of religion is no exception. Freud's analysis of the hidden forces within the human personality had compelled not just those concerned with the theory of religion, but almost everyone associated with its practice, theologians, clergy, counselors, and teachers, to look beneath the surface of accepted doctrines and discover the deep, unnoticed elements of personality that shape human religious faith and are in turn shaped by it. Freud discovered another dimension of our mind. It is no coincidence that various specialists in their research rely on his works. By borrowing his ideas, they get a powerful impetus for their creativity. Doctors may find here new approaches to understanding the problem of neurosis, lawyers inspired to pay attention to the origins of so-called unmotivated crimes. It helps writers and poets to understand the processes of creativity and find inspiration. So it isn't his not always scientific logic, but his slightly crazy style of thinking what inspires many to raise really deep questions. Freud was one of the first who explained religion by showing not what truth or rationality believers find in their ideas, but rather what is the psychological mechanism that creates religious beliefs, regardless of whether they are true or false, rational or irrational. If Freud taught us anything, it is that people are not always completely or fully aware of their own motives. He gave start to many interesting questions that we still want to explore. We want to look at our brain and see what it can tell us about our attraction to religiosity or belief in supernatural phenomena, what forces us to behave religiously at the first place. Some accuse him of being too stubborn or fanatical about his non-scientific claims. And it's true, in many cases we all can get too excited or fanatical about some ideas that emotionally pleasing us. Jonathan Haidt demonstrates how various biases make even pro-science liberals to act anti-scientifically when their values are at stake. In such moments they could become more fundamentalist than their conservative opponents. Thus, our emotions often rule over our reasoning. And we see that many people accuse Freud of being driven often by his emotions or personal interest rather than reasoning. Just think about yourself, do you always act rationally? It is like arguing about politics with someone. No matter how much evidence you provide, your opponent simply ignores them. They don't hear you, so it is senseless to convince many people relying on rational arguments. Homeopathy or astrology has been debunked so many times. There is evidence, but people simply ignore them. It shows that not all people approach their belief systems rationally, we often believe emotionally. And yet, in his works we find different portraits of Freud and signs of his flexibility rather than stubbornness. He is not always consistent in his judgment. In The Future of Illusion, when talking about the idea that secular education may help us to become more rational and to create non-religious world, he states, "But I will moderate my zeal and admit the possibility that I too am chasing an illusion. Perhaps the effect of the religious prohibition of thought may not be so bad as I suppose. Perhaps it will turn out that human nature remains the same even if education is not abused in order to subject people to religion. I do not know, and you cannot know either." Yes, he still wants us to give a try to non-religious upbringing, but he is willing to recognize that he isn't right. Should the experiment prove unsatisfactory, I am ready to give up the reform and to return to my earlier purely descriptive judgment that man is a creature of weak intelligence who is ruled by his instinctual wishes. In his works, Freud points that while he also believes in some sort of atheistic utopia, his illusion differs from the religious one in the sense that he is ready to easily give it up if it turns out to be ineffective. He follows the evidence and is ready to reject it, while religious dogmas follow a different logic and therefore they aren't as flexible. But of course it's up to you to judge whether he really was that flexible. And maybe the final thing I want to mention is regarding non-religious society. You see, when some people claim that it is absolutely impossible, even in the distant future, to build a society that Freud imagines, Why? Because we always will be religious, and no matter what Freud claims, he himself behaved religiously. Mircea Eliade, for example, stated in his Sacred and Profane, the great majority of the irreligious are not liberated from religious behavior. It is no less to be seen in movements that openly avow themselves to be secular or even anti-religious. But does this mean that we are always going to be religious? Does it mean that Freud was religious even if he himself claimed to be non-religious? And if we are hardwired for religion, then in what exact sense? Are we hardwired for religious behavior or belief? These are two very different assertions. In any argument about religiosity or non-religiosity, it is important to admit that those are the terms that have many various definitions. Among scholars and in popular culture, they are understood differently with countless labels attached to them. So when Freud claimed that he is non-religious, should we trust him? If phenomenologists of religion ask us to respect personal opinion and feeling of religious people and call them religious even if they do not fit into our understanding of religion, same thing should be applied to Freud. If it all comes to interpretation and definition, then who has a perfect interpretation? No one. We must allow people to have right to define their own status and don't put any labels on them. As a joke states, how do you call a Jew who doesn't believe in God? The answer, a Jew. So even if someone calls a Jew not a genuine Jew, if they understand biblical stories as legends and they do not believe in God, but what if this person says, no way, I am a Jew, and who are you to tell me that I am not? I rely on my interpretation of what it means to be a Jew. Same thing can be relevant for a secular or cultural Muslim, Christian, Sikh, Shinto, and so on. In their religious community, someone can say, oh, you are not a real Christian, or you are not a real Sikh. But if they consider themselves to be one, then who could judge? It all comes to definition and interpretation. Therefore, if Freud claims that he is not religious, then how can someone claim that he is? But if he can be free of religion, why millions of other people cannot be considered free of religion? Can they be free of religious belief, behavior, and belonging all at once? At the end of the day, it all comes to how we define religion. But more importantly, how we define religiosity. What does it mean being religious and non-religious? Does it depend only on belief in the supernatural, or does it also depend on your behavior? Just imagine a country full of people like Freud. Yes, they have many weird ideas about our nature and social evolution. Yes, sometimes they may apply controversial methods. At the same time, they reject any supernatural worldview. Can we call them religious if they consider themselves to be non-religious? Someone can remind about North Korea or the Soviet Union. So yes, such group of people may rely on some sort of secular ideology. It may even fit under the definition of secular or civil religion. But can we, with certainty, call such group of people religious? Can we allow Freud to be non-religious? And if so, can we allow a group of people to be non-religious? At the end of the day, it all comes to our own definition of religiosity and our own interpretation. We must remember that religion is a complex phenomenon and it evolves. It always keeps changing, and what we call a religion now may take absolutely different shape in the distant future. He reduced religion to fit his own ideas. He was good at noticing many delicate things and making us think about them. But if we want to fully consider the future of religion and the adequacy of the activities of modern anti-religious movements, we probably need to reconsider many of Freud's conclusions. So, did Freud put legitimate questions for us? Well, yes and no. Some of them were absolutely bizarre, but some were quite intriguing. So it's up to you to decide. And finally, you don't have to trust my interpretation of Freud. Therefore, I encourage everyone to go and read his works. Friends, thank you so much for watching until the end. If you like what I do, please consider supporting me through Patreon or one-time donation. The links are in the description. This is a new channel, and so far I didn't have a single donation and I don't have a single patron. So you have a chance to become my first patron on Patreon. If you commit yourself even to a couple dollars a month, it will be amazing. It obviously will inspire me to work on such video reviews with even more commitment. Thank you, and I wish you peace and health wherever you are.